Hello and welcome, students of Europe Hotel School. As you get ready to step into your careers, you're going to learn pretty quickly that a hotel isn't just a building with rooms. Nope, it's a high-stakes financial asset sitting right in the middle of a really complex web of relationships. And trust me, mastering those relationships, that's the real key to success. So today, we're going to break down one of the most critical and honestly, one of the most challenging roles in our entire industry, the owner's representative.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to map out what I call the triangle of communication. This is really the power structure behind every hotel. Then, we'll dive into the clash of interests, because, well, that's where all the friction comes from. After that, we'll see how the owner's rep steps in as the unifier, and we'll look at their playbook, the specific tools they use to get to the one thing that really matters at the end of the day, maximizing the asset's value. So, let's get into it.
All right, let's start at the very core. Every major hotel you'll ever work in is a multi-million-dollar investment. But of course, it doesn't run itself. Its success or failure really hinges on the dynamic between a few key stakeholders. And understanding this triangle of communication is absolutely fundamental if you want to get into high-level asset management. And right there, in the middle of this whole ecosystem, sits the owner's representative. Think of them as the strategic linchpin. They're part translator, part diplomat, and part financial watchdog. And their one and only mission is to make sure every stakeholder's goals line up with the owner's primary objective, which is always maximizing the long-term value of the property. So who are these key players that make up the triangle? It's pretty straightforward. First, you've got the owner. That's the investor, the one putting up the capital. Second, you have the operator. That's the management team on the ground, running the hotel day in and day out. And finally, you have the brand, the flag, the name that provides that global recognition and sets the standards. Okay, so this is where things start to get interesting and a little complicated, because while all three of these players want the hotel to be successful, how they define success can be fundamentally different, and this creates this natural, constant tension right at the heart of the asset. Just look at this table. It tells the whole story. Each stakeholder has a totally distinct focus. The owner, they're driven by the numbers, plain and simple, specifically cash flow and the internal rate of return, or IRR, which is really just a fancy way of measuring how profitable the investment is. The operator, on the other hand, they're completely consumed with the guest experience and making sure daily operations run smoothly. And the brand? They're focused on one thing above all else, protecting their global standards and making sure the experience is consistent, whether you're in Paris or Dubai. Let's make this real. Imagine the brand says every single property needs to install some costly new in-room technology. The operator might actually love this idea. It could be a cool new tool to improve guest service. But the owner, all they see is a huge check to write, a major capital expense that hurts cash flow without any guaranteed return on investment. You see the problem? This is a classic conflict, and it happens all the time. And this creates a huge risk, right? You've got three powerful forces, all pulling the asset in different directions. So who steps in? Who stops it from getting torn apart? Who can actually translate the brand's big vision, the operator's day-to-day reality, and the owner's financial demands into a single, cohesive strategy? And that brings us right back to our hero, the owner's representative. You see, their job isn't just about reporting numbers. It's about being that essential unifier, that diplomat in the room who knows how to navigate these incredibly complex relationships. This is a core principle we teach. The best, most effective owner's reps are unifiers. Period. They get that picking a side, whether it's with the operator or the brand, is a really short-sighted way to play the game. Their true value comes from being able to synthesize all those different perspectives to find the one path forward that best serves the long-term financial health of the asset. So the main takeaway here is that this is, at its heart, a communication role. It's all about translating the language of finance for operators and brands, and then translating the language of brand standards and guest satisfaction back to the owner. And that takes an incredible amount of diplomacy and real strategic insight. So how do they pull this off? Well, it's not by improvising. It's done through a really disciplined and structured communication framework. Let's take a look at the playbook that keeps everybody aligned and, just as importantly, accountable. This whole framework is really built on three distinct communication channels. For the owner, the rep's job is to filter out all the day-to-day operational noise and deliver a clear financial signal and a concise monthly summary. For the operator, it's all about structured asset management meetings to make sure performance is constantly being measured against the original business plan. And with the brand, the representative basically acts as an auditor, making sure the hotel is getting the full value in distribution, in marketing, and support that those hefty franchise fees are paying for.
And all this structured communication, all these meetings and reports, it's not just for the sake of it. It all drives towards one single critical goal: maximizing the value of that asset. This entire communication framework is designed to prevent one of the single biggest threats to a hotel investment, and that's something we call the expectation gap. For an owner, this is a seriously dangerous blind spot to have. So what is an expectation gap? It's that dangerous space that opens up when an owner believes everything is going according to plan, while the reality on the ground for the operator is actually quite different. And by the time this gap shows up in the financial reports, it's often way too late to course correct without some major pain. It just destroys trust between partners and can do real damage to the investment.
So you see, the core job of the owner's representative is to close that gap before it even has a chance to form. It's about relentless, transparent, and proactive communication to make sure all stakeholders are working from the exact same playbook. And that alignment, that's the foundation for long-term financial stability and success. So I'll leave you with this one question to think about as you go out and build your careers. In an industry that's all about tangible things, brick, mortar, beds, could it be that the single most valuable asset we manage isn't the building itself? Could it be that invisible framework of communication that actually protects its value? Something to think about. Thank you.